Well, Steve, I have to admit, I don't know of this story, but when I hear the title, the name of the settlement, Kingdom of the Happy Land, the first thing that goes through my head is it's a 19th century fun park. But I don't think that's what it is it?
No, no, not a bit. This is a unique story. I had never heard of this until I just happened to run across this story a couple of weeks ago. And it's a very interesting story. I really don't know exactly how to explain it other than, well, you just have to listen to see what you think about this. It is just one of those stories. But Rod, most of what's known about this place, and it is seriously the Kingdom of the Happy Land, it comes from a book called The Kingdom of the Happy Land, naturally, published in 1957 and written by a woman named Sadie Smathers Patton from Henderson County, from interviews with descendants of those folks who live there. Now, there are other differing accounts written over the years for newspapers in North Carolina as well, from which we get the following version of this story. So to begin, we go back to 1865 at the close of the Civil War when the South lay in ruins. A slave named William lived on a plantation in Mississippi. Now, his father was, well, a white man, actually the man that owned the plantation. And despite his son being a slave, he made sure that he had an education. William became the leader of a group of former slaves and gave them a vision, a dream of a communal village to call their own, somewhere to the east. And with the goal of reaching that promised land, they left Mississippi, headed east, growing their numbers as they traveled over the next few years. Now, William, who adopted his slave master father's last name of Montgomery, led his group of refugees from Mississippi through Alabama to Georgia and then on to South Carolina, looking for land on which to build a new home.
Well, local freedmen in South Carolina guided them towards the Appalachian Mountains, describing it as a vast, uninhabited expanse where freedmen might find a piece of land to call home. Now, I'm using that word, freed men, because these were supposed to be freed slaves, free men, okay? In 1867, though, the group arrived on the South Carolina-North Carolina border where they encountered Sarepta Davis, widow of Colonel John Davis, the owner of a plantation there. Now, Colonel Davis was a seasoned U.S. Army veteran who served under, well, you guessed it, General Andrew Jackson in the War of 1812. Well, after the war, he met and married Sarepta Merritt, who lived in Merrittsville, ironically, near Greenville, South Carolina. Davis acquired 1,000 acres of land along the Buncombe Turnpike in North and South Carolina. There he established his plantation, and he named it Oakland, complete with an inn that catered to stagecoach lines. Unfortunately, though, Colonel Davis passed away in 1859, and with the end of the Civil War and emancipation, the plantation was left in a state of neglect. The aging and now penniless Mrs. Davis, unable to maintain it by herself and without resources to pay for it, and helping run the operation.
Well, Rod, Sarepta Davis, hoping to rescue that beloved home of hers, made a daring proposal to that group led by William Montgomery. In exchange for working the land, she granted them 180 acres in a valley and on the ridge above what's now Lake Summit along the Green River. The group, estimated to be between about 50 to 200 black refugees, accepted the offer and began building their community. Each family received land to build a house and cultivate a vegetable garden. They utilized timber from the mountains for constructing log homes and carved granite from the ground to build chimneys. Now, this endeavor was more than just securing a new home. It was about reviving African culture and building a new tribe. By the 1870s, the community had not only a name, but also a unique form of government.
Well, William Montgomery was now known as the King, and his wife, Luella, the Queen, and they ruled the Kingdom of the Happy Land. There's where we get our title. This leadership structure mirrored traditional African tribes, with the king and queen serving as teachers and priests for their kingdom. Now, Luella took on the role of an educator, teaching children their school lessons and training them in hymns and spirituals. She even formed the Kingdom Singers, a musical group that performed programs during the summer in communities around Happy Land. The echoes of their powerful songs resonated through the hills and hollers. But when William died, his brother Robert took over as king, with Luella remaining as queen. Robert lived in North Carolina, and Luella lived just a few yards away in South Carolina. It was said that when William died and a new leader was raised up, the wail that echoed through the mountains, "The king is dead," was soon drowned out in the surging shout, "Long live the king."
Well, now, Rod, here's where the kingdom was a little bit different. It operated as a collective, with all the resources, the money and goods that they produced pooled and distributed as the king and queen decreed. By 1870, nearly 400 people called Happy Land their home. They built communal barns, expanded their land holdings, and engaged in various crafts and trades. And the kingdom thrived, producing enough food for sale in markets and creating goods like spinning, weaving, knitting, carpentry, stonemasonry, and ironworking. They even contributed timber for the railroad being constructed throughout the area. Now, one of the kingdom's most renowned products was something called Happy Land liniment, a remedy for rheumatism and aches, showcasing their resourcefulness and self-sufficiency. Kind of a bit of a patent medicine, if you want to call it that. Perfect for that time. Well, they also provided curative herbs for those in need, and some even ventured into, moonshining. How about that, Rod?
Well, of course, they couldn't do anything without having a little bit of moonshine along the way. They had to be able to do that to try to at least be self-sufficient in one way. But all of this made the kingdom of the Happy Land one of the few fully independent black communities in the South. However, in the 1880s, the tide of change swept through the kingdom with the arrival of the railroad in western North Carolina. The newfound convenience disrupted the economic foundations of Happy Land, leading to a gradual decline. You see, the kingdom had built up a good business, transporting goods into and out of the area on horse-drawn wagons. With the new railroad, that service, it was no longer needed, nor was there as much of a demand for the kingdom's locally produced goods and food. Since the railroad could not bring those things into the area to be sold just as cheaply, if not more so, than the workers at Happy Land could. Families seeking better opportunities started leaving the commune, finding work in places like Hendersonville and Greenville, along with more distant locations. As they departed, many of them sold their parts of the kingdom to white families, a trend that continued until the last remnants of Happy Land were sold around 1900.
And the last person remaining in Happy Land, Jerry Casey, died in 1918 in the old Robert Montgomery house. The property was eventually abandoned and was sold in a Henderson County tax sale for unpaid property taxes. Now, the land where the Kingdom of the Happy Land is located is now the site of a legal marijuana farm used to collect and process CBD oil for sale and inaccessible to the public. Although, Rod, I believe that they have had pictures. I've seen some pictures, probably about 30 years old, where they still had the chimneys standing. Even though the log cabins were gone, the chimneys were still standing. Unfortunately, like I said, you can't get up there and see it nowadays.
Wow. And it seems just unreal that they had this community, that all of these people came together. And, it's kind of, they were all brought together in this commune. What can you say about it? It's a place for them to be self-sufficient, function on their own, and so forth. And in one way, I think it was to prove to other people, hey, they could do things. They didn't need any help. and they were able to do this sort of thing. But, it's really an interesting story. Never knew it happened, never knew anything about it, but still, just something very interesting to learn about just some of the history of Appalachia.
Yeah, this is a very little known story. And the whole process in this thing was to try to recreate, I guess, from oral tradition, what an African tribe and an African village would be like. And
Right.
I think that's part of where this communal living concept came into play. Best that I can tell, they were not bothered by anybody where they were at. You know, nobody came and aggravated them. There were no Klansmen coming out there, nothing at all like that. They actually lived there and took care of themselves, were self-sufficient, provided the communities, and probably could have continued on had the railroad itself not come in and sort of made the work that they did a bit obsolete. The only thing that I've seen that would be close to any conflict is that there were rumors among many of their neighbors that Luella Montgomery was a voodoo princess and was casting voodoo spells and things like that. But other than that, no, nothing at all like that. She was, from what I've been able to gather, a very church-going lady, and taught the kids the Bible and taught them how to read and write and do the mathematics and all that. Certainly not a voodoo princess that I can tell. Interesting story, though.
Well, something, yeah. But something here that I could say is, maybe it was a little bit of jealousy. Somebody was just looking at the whole situation and seeing how she was able to do these things and so forth, and she was able to accomplish so much. You know how rumors are. Rumors get started. That could have very well been the catalyst for what, people would have thought of her being a voodoo queen or a voodoo princess, however you want to define her.
And folks, that's the story of the Kingdom of the Happy Land. Another one of the stories of Appalachia. Thanks for listening. Now, if you haven't done so already, don't forget to subscribe to the Stories podcast. We're on Spreaker, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Audible, Good Pods, or wherever you get your podcasts at. Till next we meet, y'all take care. So long, everybody.